Are you confused about the best way to store salt? Well, you're not alone. There's so much conflicting advice out there. Vacuum pack it. No, don't vacuum pack it. Use oxygen absorbers. No, don't use oxygen absorbers. Use desiccant packages. Never store in metal containers. I mean, there's just so much misinformation or conflicting information out there. Well, who do you believe? I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. But you know what? If you store it wrong, you could end up with a solid brick of salt instead of salt that you can put in your salt shaker. Hi, I'm Mary Ellen, or better known as Prepper Potpourri, and I've been on YouTube for over a decade making different videos to help you know the correct way to store food safely and easy. So if you're into practical tips like this, just hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. Really appreciate it. In today's video, I'm going to cut through all that confusion and show you exactly how to store salt for the long haul. I'll explain the do's and the don'ts, what really works, and saving you from making some common and could be costly mistakes. And we're going to open a package of salt that I stored 10 years ago. Will it be a solid salt brick? So, okay, you might be thinking, why even store salt long term? Well, salt is more important than you think. You know, it's not just about flavoring your food, but food would be rather bland without it. But sodium is also important for your body. It regulates your fluids, keeps your muscles and nerves working, and even keeping your heart beating like it should. Without adequate sodium, you could suffer from dehydration, painful muscle cramps, and even more serious health concerns. And let's not forget, salt can make food taste so much more flavorful. Just imagine eating this batch of French fries with no salt. Well, no thank you. Our bodies rely on a daily intake of about 2,300 milligrams, which is equal to only 1 teaspoon of salt. And if you're older, you might need even less. But storing salt makes sure you have this important ingredient in your food storage in case of emergency or whenever you might need it. So whether you're meal prepping, maybe bulk buying, or just want to be prepared for whatever emergency comes your way, storing salt is important. Okay, you know the importance of storing salt now, but how much salt should you store? Well, it's recommended that you store about 5 pounds, which is about equal to this. This is 4 pounds, this is a little over 1 pound, per person per year. Really, doesn't take up much room. But now, the Latter-day Saints recommend 8 pounds per person per year. And if you watched an excellent video by the Provident Prepper, they recommend 10 pounds per year. But I think it might depend on what type of food you keep in your food storage. I mean, if you buy a lot of commercially canned stuff, like what is this, Jazzy Jambalaya with chicken sausage and ham, chunky soup, let's check the sodium on it. Well, 1 serving, which is 1/2 this can, is 34% of your daily requirement. Or maybe you're storing commercially bought freeze-dried food like Mountain House. Let's see, this is the lasagna, and it has 2.5 servings here once you add the water. And its sodium is 13% a serving. So, not as much sodium as your canned soup. So, it's up to you to decide how much salt you should store for your family's needs. But I recommend not going below the minimum of 5 pounds per person per year. So what kind of salt should you store? Well, there's a lot of different kinds. There's table salt. This happens to be the iodized, and you can buy the non-iodized table salt. And it is not pure salt. It has an anti-clumping. Let's see. It is salt, calcium silicate, which it says is an anti-caking agent, dextrose, and potassium iodide. And I should mention about iodized salt. They don't usually recommend it for long-term storage, although I store it long-term, because the iodine can lose potency over time, but otherwise it's just fine to use. Then you could have sea salt. Here's natural sea salt, and according to this package, the ingredients is sea salt, so it's a pure salt. And then you could store kosher salt, which actually has salt, yellow prussiate of soda, an anti-caking agent. Or maybe you have all natural canning and pickling salt, something I use when I can, and it is salt. That's it. There's nothing else in here. And then there's also those fancy salt brands like the Himalayan pink salt. I mean, there's a lot of different salt out there. So I recommend store a variety of salts, but your main salt should be what you usually use. If you usually use table salt, store the most table salt. If you usually use sea salt, store the most sea salt. Again, completely up to you. We've all heard salt lasts indefinitely. So what are the problems you could occur when you're storing salt? Well, number one is clumping. And eventually it could become a solid brick if exposed to too much moisture. And the second thing is you have to be careful what you store it in or what you store it next to, because salt can absorb different odors. Okay, going on the basics. Now let's go into the do's and don'ts of salt storage. On some sites, like I saw it on Reddit last week, it said, best way to store salt, vacuum pack it. And while it's true, vacuum packing is great for a lot of long-term storage solutions, you should not do it for storing salt. Again, absence of oxygen can cause it to become a solid salt brick. But then can you use an oxygen absorber? Well, again, you really shouldn't, because what's that doing? Absorbing the oxygen, and again, you could end up with that solid salt brick. So, no vacuum packing, no oxygen absorber. What about a desiccant package? Yes, you can, because what's the purpose of a desiccant package? To remove moisture. However, make sure you are using the food grade desiccants. Sometimes those that you might get in when you buy a new pair of shoes, in there, it might not be the type of desiccant you should be using in your food. And if you are interested in purchasing some desiccant packages, I have a link below to this on Amazon. What I like about them is these are little orange pellets, and they will turn dark green when they have absorbed moisture, so it's time to replace. And you can always put these in a low grade temperature oven and it will rejuvenate and you can use them again. And what about don't store in metal containers? I have seen that. What they say is that it could cause corrosion, and that may be true, but I store my kosher salt in here that I use, and I mean, year after year, and I have not had any problems. The nice thing about it is it does have a nice seal on it. So, is it bad storing in metal containers? Jury's out in my opinion. And also, my favorite salt shaker is a bartender salt shaker. And it is metal, and again, never any problem with corrosion from salt. Another don't, there's no need to store your salt in a Mylar bag. Save those Mylar bags for something that needs to be stored in it for long term. I do want to say if you're storing in buckets, make sure they're food grade buckets, and wherever you're storing it, it's best if it's not high humidity and huge temperature fluctuations. Now for long term, you can do it the way I'm going to show you, but you can also store in mason jars. Just pour your salt in, and then you might want to add a desiccant package right at the top there. And just put on your canning lid or a lid like this, and now it's ready for your pantry shelf or your long-term emergency pantry. Now, let me show you what I recommend for storing salt. So I store a variety of salt in their own containers. Like this, but I really prefer these because it seems to be a little bit sturdier cardboard container. And I looked up once and it said very often the manufacturer stores the salt in cardboard because the cardboard can act as a little bit of a moisture absorbent. Don't know if that's true, but you'll notice that most of your salt does not come in plastic bags. I always recommend writing the purchase date on your salt before you store it. That way you always know how old it is and when to rotate. So I just store it in a food grade bucket. I've got rice and I've got some holes poked in it. And then I just put my containers in here right in their natural, put that over a little bit, right in their natural packaging. Here, and we got another one here, and I'm just adding another rice here, hopefully to absorb moisture. And we're just going to put on our gamma lid. So this is my original salt bucket, and I originally put stuff in 9/14, that's right, 2014, and there's still a couple in here that way. But I've added new October 2024, so I've indicated that here. And now it's going to go back in the prep room in the basement. Now, I have to be honest. Does adding rice to my bucket make a difference? Does that rice help absorb excess moisture? I really don't know because I didn't have a control bucket with no rice. But it was based on what my mom used to always do, right? She always had some kernels of rice in the bottom of her salt shaker, especially in the summer, so it didn't clump up and it always worked for her. So I just kind of capitalized that in a larger fashion, and I use rice when I'm storing my salt. And we're going to open a package of salt that I stored 10 years ago. Will it be a solid salt brick? It was packed in 9/14, so this is 10 years old in my food storage. Okay. So, are there some bricks? Well, do you call them bricks? Because look at. Really. I mean, this beautiful salt just breaks right apart. This is 10 years in storage by using the method I do. I really don't think that's bad at all. Let's see, we've got a bigger one here. Let's get there. Yeah, just make sure you got clean hands, and your salt, after 10 years, will still be pourable. There you have it, 10-year-old stored salt. Now, salt lasts indefinitely. Yes, and the salt I'm showing you is 10 years old because I did not follow my cardinal rule, which is rotate, rotate, rotate. My husband might notice, oh, we're getting low on salt, and go out and buy more salt instead of going down and taking a salt out of this bucket. So my salt ended up to be 10 years old. But that's not what I usually recommend. I really like to go more in a 3-year cycle where I rotate through all my supplies so I can have the freshest supplies possible. But as you can see, even after 10 years, it was absolutely fine. Storing salt the way I just showed you is so easy. So you have no excuse not to do it. Comment below if you store salt some other way, because we all learn from each other. Like I said, I have been making videos on YouTube for over a decade on food storage and preparedness. So I hope you subscribe and hit that notification button. And if you're interested in storing sugar, well, let's make a sugar bucket together.